One careless heartbeat can change the fate of a kingdom. Emily Carter had repeated those words in her mind ever since she began working in the Royal Alchemy Wing, although she had always believed they belonged to someone far greater than an overlooked Omega whose job was to polish crystal flasks and organize dried herbs before sunrise. Every morning, long before the palace echoed with the footsteps of nobles and commanders, she quietly crossed the marble corridors carrying woven baskets filled with moon lavender, silver sage, and frost mint harvested from the royal gardens. The scent of herbs always calmed her, even when whispers followed wherever she walked. The servants called her invisible when they thought she could not hear. The apprentices smiled politely until someone important entered the room, then suddenly forgot she existed. Emily never argued. She simply lowered her eyes and continued working, believing that kindness cost less than resentment. That morning felt different the moment she stepped into the laboratory. The air itself carried a strange warmth despite the autumn chill outside. Rows of enchanted glass shimmered beneath pale blue lanterns, and every alchemist stood unusually still, speaking only in hushed voices. At the center of the chamber rested a circular stone table where dozens of glowing ingredients surrounded a single crystal vial no larger than a coffee mug. Inside, a swirling silver liquid reflected tiny streaks of blue light, moving as though it possessed a heartbeat of its own. Emily had never seen anything so beautiful or so unsettling. "Don't touch anything near the center," one senior alchemist warned without looking at her. "His Majesty arrives in minutes." Emily nodded immediately, keeping both hands wrapped around her basket. She knew the rules. She always knew the rules. The laboratory doors slowly opened, and every conversation disappeared. Alpha King Damien Blackwood entered with calm, measured steps, dressed in a dark charcoal coat embroidered with silver thread that caught the lantern light like distant stars. His reputation filled every corner of the kingdom. Warriors admired his courage. Children admired his fairness. Even those who feared the immense power sleeping within his wolf admitted he had brought peace to lands that had known generations of conflict. Yet standing only a few yards away, Emily noticed something no rumor had ever mentioned. He looked exhausted. The faint shadows beneath his pale blue eyes hinted at countless sleepless nights, and although his posture remained perfectly straight, there was a quiet tension in every measured breath he took. The royal alchemist carefully lifted the crystal vial. "This latest formula should keep the wolf settled longer than the previous version," he said softly. Damien gave a small nod, but said nothing. His attention lingered on the shimmering potion as though he trusted it no more than an approaching storm. Emily carefully stepped backward, determined to stay unnoticed, but one loose page of parchment slid beneath her shoe. She felt the paper shift. Her balance disappeared for a fraction of a second. The basket slipped from her hands. Bundles of herbs scattered across the polished floor. She reached instinctively to catch them before they rolled beneath the stone table. Her fingertips brushed against its carved edge. The crystal vial trembled. Time seemed to stop. Every face in the laboratory froze. Emily's eyes widened as the potion slowly tipped, balanced for one impossible heartbeat before falling from the table. It struck the marble floor with a delicate chime instead of a crash, and shimmering silver liquid spread across the white stone like liquid moonlight before vanishing into the ancient runes carved beneath the laboratory. Silence swallowed the room. No one moved. No one breathed. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear herself whisper, "I'm so sorry." Before anyone answered, every lantern in the laboratory flickered at once. A deep vibration rolled through the stone beneath their feet, subtle but unmistakable, like the distant echo of something ancient awakening. Damien remained perfectly still. His eyes slowly closed. One steady breath escaped him, then another. When he opened his eyes again, the familiar calm within them had vanished, replaced by a brilliant silver glow that reflected across the laboratory walls. Around him, invisible currents stirred loose papers into the air, extinguished several lanterns, and sent cold drafts rushing through the chamber. Every seasoned alchemist instinctively stepped backward. No one spoke his name. No one needed to. They all understood the same terrifying truth at exactly the same moment. The potion had not merely been spilled. Whatever had kept the Alpha King's wolf peacefully restrained was suddenly, completely gone. Emily could not force herself to move. Every instinct told her to run, yet her legs refused to obey as the laboratory seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The silver glow in Damien Blackwood's eyes brightened until it reflected from every polished surface, turning the quiet chamber into something that felt suspended between reality and legend. Ancient symbols carved into the marble floor shimmered beneath his boots before fading just as quickly, as though whatever magic had once been sleeping inside the palace had suddenly awakened. The royal alchemist recovered first. "Seal the chamber," he shouted, his usually calm voice cracking beneath the weight of fear. "No one leaves. No one enters." Guards rushed toward the towering bronze doors, sliding heavy bars into place, while apprentices scrambled to gather scattered scrolls and enchanted instruments before invisible gusts swept them across the room again. Glass chimed softly as shelves trembled, but nothing shattered. The palace itself almost seemed determined to remain standing despite the invisible storm gathering around its king. Damien remained silent. His breathing became slower, deeper, measured as though every inhale required tremendous concentration. Emily noticed his hands tighten only slightly before relaxing again. He was fighting something no one else could see. His expression never became cruel or angry. Instead, it carried the quiet exhaustion of someone holding back an ocean with nothing but determination. "Your Majesty," the royal alchemist said carefully, refusing to step closer than several yards. "Please remain still while we prepare another formula." Damien did not answer. His gaze drifted across the room, not searching for danger, but searching for control. Every person lowered their eyes except Emily. She had forgotten every lesson about palace etiquette. She simply looked at him with growing concern. For a brief moment, their eyes met. The brilliant silver glow softened ever so slightly, almost becoming human again, before another wave of invisible pressure rolled outward. Lantern flames bent sideways. Loose parchment lifted into graceful spirals. Shelves groaned against the stone walls. Several younger apprentices stumbled backward, their faces pale with panic. "Evacuate everyone except essential personnel," one commander ordered. Nobody argued. Within seconds, servants and assistants hurried toward the doors. Emily finally found enough strength to step aside, intending to follow them. But two senior attendants suddenly blocked her path. "Not you," one of them snapped. "This happened because of you." The words struck harder than she expected. Emily lowered her head, unable to defend herself. She knew the accident had been hers. Whether or not anyone believed it had been unintentional no longer seemed to matter. Behind her, another low vibration echoed through the chamber. Damien slowly turned away from the center table and began walking toward the far balcony overlooking the palace gardens. His pace remained steady, yet every step seemed heavier than the last. Outside, dark clouds drifted across the afternoon sky, although the weather forecast had promised clear sunshine until evening. Cold wind slipped through the open balcony doors, carrying the scent of pine forests from the northern mountains. Damien stopped near the stone railing and closed his eyes once more. Emily watched his shoulders rise and fall with each careful breath. He looked less like a king and more like a man desperately trying not to become someone he feared. Suddenly the silence broke. A long, distant howl echoed from somewhere beyond the palace walls. Every guard instinctively reached for a weapon before realizing the sound had not come from outside at all. It had come from within the palace itself, resonating through ancient stone like a forgotten memory answering an older call. Emily felt chills race along her arms. The sound carried neither rage nor menace. It carried loneliness. It sounded as though something had been imprisoned for far too long and no longer remembered what freedom felt like. Damien's fingers gripped the balcony rail. His breathing faltered for the first time. The silver light in his eyes brightened once again. "Everyone," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Leave." No one moved. The commander hesitated, looking toward the royal alchemist for guidance. Damien spoke again, this time with calm authority that allowed no argument. "Please." The single word carried enough quiet resolve that even the most seasoned guards obeyed. One by one, they backed away toward the exit, taking reluctant steps while refusing to turn their backs on their king. Emily followed until she realized someone had caught her wrist. She looked down in surprise. Damien had not turned around. He still faced the distant mountains beyond the palace gardens, yet his hand rested gently around her sleeve. His grip was neither forceful nor frightened. It was simply steady. Without looking at her, he spoke so softly that only she could hear. "Do not let them send you away." Before Emily could answer, another invisible wave swept through the laboratory, extinguishing every remaining lantern at exactly the same moment, leaving only pale daylight and the mysterious silver glow surrounding the Alpha King. Emily stared at the hand gently holding the edge of her sleeve, unable to understand why the most powerful man in the kingdom had asked her to stay when everyone else wanted her gone. Before she could answer, Damien slowly released his grip and remained facing the open balcony as the cold wind carried the scent of pine and rain through the darkened laboratory. The silver light still shimmered within his eyes, but now it flickered like a candle struggling against an unseen storm. The last lantern had gone dark, leaving only afternoon sunlight spilling across the marble floor. No one dared speak above a whisper. The royal alchemist finally stepped forward with cautious determination, carrying another tray filled with empty crystal bottles, enchanted herbs, and polished silver instruments. His hands trembled despite decades of experience. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "we can prepare another stabilizing formula, but we will need several hours." Damien remained silent. His shoulders rose with one slow breath before settling again. Every person in the room waited for permission to move. Instead, another quiet pulse rippled through the laboratory. This time the enchanted shelves responded. Hundreds of tiny glass bottles began humming together, producing a low musical vibration that echoed through the chamber like distant voices singing beneath the earth. Emily had never witnessed magic behaving this way. She looked toward the royal alchemist, expecting instructions, but his expression revealed only confusion. "That should not be happening," he whispered to himself. "None of this should be happening." A palace messenger rushed into the laboratory, breathing heavily after climbing several flights of stairs. "The royal council is gathering," he announced. "Rumors are already spreading through the palace. They are asking whether the Alpha King is safe." Several attendants exchanged uneasy glances. Rumors traveled faster than truth inside royal walls. By sunset, servants would likely be whispering that the kingdom had lost its ruler. Emily lowered her eyes again as another voice joined the conversation. "She cannot remain here." One of the senior advisors pointed directly toward her. "The accident began with her. Until we understand what happened, she should be confined to the East Tower." Emily felt every pair of eyes turn toward her. She wanted to explain that she had never intended to spill the potion, but the words refused to come. No explanation could erase what everyone had witnessed. The advisor continued without sympathy. "If another incident occurs, we cannot allow the same mistake to repeat itself." Before anyone else answered, Damien finally turned away from the balcony. The silver glow within his eyes had dimmed slightly, replaced by visible exhaustion. He looked first toward the advisor, then toward Emily. His voice remained calm, yet every word carried quiet authority. "She stays." The room fell completely silent. No one challenged him. Even the advisor lowered his head. Damien rarely repeated an order, and he did not need to now. Emily looked at him with disbelief. She had expected punishment, not protection. She could not understand why he continued defending the very person responsible for the disaster surrounding them. As the uneasy silence lingered, the royal alchemist slowly approached Emily instead of the king. He studied her carefully, not with accusation, but with curiosity. "Tell me exactly what you felt," he asked. Emily blinked. "Felt?" "The moment before the potion fell." She closed her eyes, trying to remember every detail. "The room suddenly felt warm," she answered honestly. Then everything became very quiet. It was almost as if someone was calling for help. The old alchemist frowned deeply. "Calling?" Emily nodded. "Not with words. I cannot explain it. It was only a feeling." The alchemist exchanged a long glance with Damien, whose expression revealed nothing, yet something in the room quietly changed. The old scholar reached into his robe and removed a weathered notebook bound in faded blue leather. He turned several fragile pages before stopping at an illustration of an ancient silver crest surrounded by handwritten notes almost erased by time. His eyes widened ever so slightly. "Impossible," he murmured. "This legend has not appeared in centuries." Emily tried to see the page, but he gently closed the book before she could read it. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the mountains, although only a few clouds drifted through the afternoon sky. The palace bells began ringing, calling every council member to an emergency assembly. Damien walked toward the laboratory doors with measured steps, his composure returning one careful breath at a time. Just before leaving, he paused beside Emily without looking directly at her. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "do not believe every accusation you hear today." Then he continued into the corridor as stunned guards hurried after him, leaving Emily standing beneath the fading sunlight, wondering why the Alpha King seemed far more concerned about protecting her than protecting himself. Emily spent the next hour in a quiet chamber beside the Royal Council Hall, surrounded by shelves filled with ancient records that no one seemed interested in reading anymore. Outside the tall windows, gray clouds drifted over the palace towers while servants hurried through the corridors carrying sealed messages from one council member to another. Every passing conversation grew quieter whenever they noticed her sitting alone. She did not need to hear every whispered word to understand what they believed. The careless Omega had endangered the kingdom. The careless Omega should never have entered the laboratory. She folded her hands together, wishing she could rewind a single moment and stop the crystal vial from slipping away forever. The heavy wooden door opened without warning. The royal alchemist entered carrying the faded blue notebook Emily had glimpsed earlier. His tired eyes searched the room before he quietly closed the door behind him. "You deserve to know why His Majesty refused to send you away," he said. Emily slowly stood. "Do you know the reason?" The old scholar hesitated before opening the notebook once more. Fragile pages revealed sketches of unfamiliar symbols surrounding illustrations of wolves beneath a silver moon. Most of the ink had faded with time, yet one sentence remained surprisingly clear. He traced the words with a careful finger before looking at Emily again. According to this account, there have been rare moments throughout history when an alpha overwhelmed by the wolf instinct responded peacefully to a single presence instead of fear or force. Emily remembered the laboratory, the moment Damien had looked directly at her, the strange warmth she had felt before the potion fell. "Are you saying that was me?" she asked quietly. "I do not know," the alchemist admitted. "Legends are dangerous when treated as facts, but legends often begin because someone witnessed something they could not explain." Before Emily could ask another question, a deep palace bell echoed through the stone corridors. Once, twice, then a third time. The old scholar immediately closed the notebook. The council meeting has ended sooner than expected. Footsteps quickly filled the hallway outside. Voices overlapped with growing urgency. Emily heard the words North Garden, West Courtyard, and impossible to contain repeated again and again. The alchemist's expression changed instantly. He opened the chamber door just enough to stop a passing palace guard. "What happened?" The guard swallowed hard before answering. His Majesty left the council before the meeting concluded. Witnesses said he looked calm, but moments later the palace hounds refused to enter the northern gardens. Every animal on the grounds suddenly became restless. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. "Where is the Alpha King now?" The guard shook his head. "No one knows." The words settled heavily inside the room. Damien had not disappeared out of fear. Emily somehow knew that. He had left because he was protecting everyone else from whatever struggle continued inside him. The old alchemist looked toward the window overlooking the palace grounds. Beyond carefully trimmed hedges stretched acres of ancient woodland reserved only for members of the royal family. Towering pine trees swayed beneath the strengthening wind. "He always goes there," the scholar whispered, "whenever the burden becomes too heavy." Emily stared beyond the glass. Something deep inside her stirred again. It was not panic. It was the same quiet feeling she had experienced before the accident, almost like hearing a familiar melody carried by the breeze. She could not explain why, but she knew Damien was still trying to resist whatever had awakened within him. He was alone. Without thinking, Emily reached for the chamber door. "Wait," the alchemist called after her. "If you leave now, the council will accuse you of fleeing responsibility." Emily paused only long enough to answer. "If I stay here while he is alone, I will never forgive myself." She hurried through the winding palace corridors, ignoring the startled looks from servants and guards who stepped aside as she passed. The cool afternoon air greeted her the moment she crossed the palace courtyard. Leaves drifted across the stone pathways as distant thunder rolled above the mountains once again. Ahead, beyond the royal gardens, the towering pine forest stretched beneath darkening skies. Emily slowed only when she reached the weathered iron gate leading into the ancient woods. The gate stood slightly open, moving gently with the wind, although no one was there to touch it. She placed one trembling hand against the cold iron. Somewhere beyond the trees, carried by the whispering branches instead of sound itself, she felt the unmistakable presence of the lonely soul that had been calling to her since the moment the silver potion disappeared from the laboratory floor, and before fear could convince her to turn back, she stepped through the gate and followed it into the forest. The forest welcomed Emily with a silence unlike anything she had ever known. The moment the iron gate closed behind her, the distant noise of the palace disappeared, as though the ancient pines themselves had swallowed every sound except the steady rhythm of her breathing. Cool air carried the scent of cedar, damp earth, and rain that had not yet begun to fall. Shafts of fading afternoon light filtered through towering branches, painting silver patterns across the narrow trail ahead. She had never been allowed inside the royal forest before. Servants often whispered that it belonged only to the Alpha King, because even the oldest wolves respected whatever secrets lived beneath those trees. Emily should have been afraid, yet the strange feeling guiding her grew stronger with every step. It was no longer only a sensation. It felt almost like a heartbeat gently calling to another heartbeat somewhere deeper within the woods. She followed it without questioning why. After several minutes, the path divided into 3 directions. Emily stopped, uncertain for the first time since leaving the palace. Before she could decide which trail to take, a small white owl silently landed on a weathered wooden post nearby. It tilted its head toward the left path, watched her for several seconds, then lifted into the air without making a sound. Emily smiled despite herself. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure whether she was speaking to the bird or to the forest itself. The left trail gradually climbed toward higher ground, where enormous stone pillars covered in fading moon symbols stood among the trees. Moss covered their surfaces, and tiny blue flowers bloomed between the cracks as though untouched by time. Emily brushed her fingertips across one of the carvings and felt unexpected warmth beneath the cold stone. Images flashed through her mind for only an instant. A silver moon, an ancient crown, a wolf standing peacefully beside a young woman whose face remained hidden by light. She quickly stepped back, startled by the vision. "You saw it too." The quiet voice came from behind her. Emily turned to find the royal alchemist standing several yards away, breathing heavily after climbing the wooded trail. His blue notebook rested beneath one arm, and his long gray cloak was covered with fallen pine needles. "I tried to stop you," he admitted with a tired smile. "When that failed, I decided it would be wiser to follow." Emily looked back toward the ancient pillar. What was that? The old scholar slowly approached the weathered carving. "Memories," he answered. "Or perhaps echoes. This forest has existed longer than the kingdom itself. Some places remember what people forget." He carefully opened the faded notebook again, turning several delicate pages until he found another nearly vanished illustration. This drawing matched the stone pillar perfectly. Around it were handwritten notes describing an ancient ritual performed centuries before the first royal castle had ever been built. Emily listened as the scholar quietly read one surviving sentence. "The potion was never created to weaken the wolf. It was created to silence the bond between the king and the one chosen by the moon until the proper season arrived." Emily frowned. "Then everyone has misunderstood its purpose." The old man nodded slowly. "Generation after generation. Even I believed it was only medicine." A cold breeze swept through the clearing, turning the pages of the notebook by itself until they stopped on the final illustration. This time the picture showed a silver vial resting beside a full moon, while a handwritten warning stretched beneath it in faded ink. The scholar read the surviving words aloud. "Should the seal be broken before destiny awakens, the wolf will no longer answer the potion. It will search only for the one whose presence restores balance." Neither of them spoke for several long moments. Emily felt her pulse quicken. "Are you saying the accident may not have awakened something new?" The scholar quietly interrupted. "It may have removed something that was hiding the truth all along." Before Emily could respond, the wind suddenly stopped. Every branch became perfectly still. Even the birds fell silent. The peaceful forest seemed to pause with quiet expectation. Somewhere beyond the towering pines, a familiar presence drew closer. This time, Emily no longer sensed loneliness alone. She sensed recognition. She slowly turned toward the deeper forest where soft silver light shimmered between the distant trees. And although she still could not see Damien anywhere beyond the glowing mist, she knew with complete certainty that he had already found her before she ever realized she had been searching for him. Emily could not explain why her fear slowly disappeared as she stepped toward the silver light weaving through the ancient pines. Every instinct she had ever trusted should have told her to stop, yet the quiet pull inside her heart only grew stronger. The royal alchemist remained several steps behind, choosing not to interrupt whatever invisible path had begun unfolding before them. The forest itself seemed strangely alive. Leaves drifted gently through still air without touching the ground, while shafts of pale light slipped between towering branches and settled across the narrow trail like silent invitations. Then she saw him. Damien stood beside a crystal-clear stream that wound through the heart of the royal forest. His dark coat stirred lightly in the breeze, and his head remained lowered as though he had been listening to the flowing water for hours. The silver glow within his eyes had not disappeared, but it no longer looked wild. Instead, it flickered with quiet uncertainty, as if two parts of the same soul were struggling to understand one another. Emily stopped several feet away, careful not to surprise him. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The only sound came from the gentle stream slipping over smooth stones polished by countless seasons. Damien finally lifted his gaze. "You should not have followed me," he said softly. Emily smiled with quiet honesty. "I tried not to." A faint expression almost resembling amusement crossed his face before fading again. "Then why are you here?" She searched for an answer that made sense, but none of the words she found seemed large enough. "Because it felt wrong to leave you alone." Silence returned. Damien looked toward the distant trees instead of answering. "Everyone else believes I need stronger guards, stronger magic, stronger walls," he said after a while. "You were the first person who thought I needed company." Emily lowered her eyes. "I did not think about it that way. I only knew you looked lonely." The breeze gently stirred the branches overhead. Something changed almost immediately. The silver light surrounding Damien softened until it reflected across the stream like scattered moonlight instead of a gathering storm. Even the restless wind became calm. The royal alchemist quietly watched from the edge of the clearing, his weathered eyes widening with disbelief. He slowly opened the faded notebook once again and compared the peaceful scene before him to the ancient illustrations inside its pages. Every detail matched more closely than he had ever imagined possible. Damien closed his eyes and released a long, steady breath. "It is quieter," he whispered. "The wolf is quieter." Emily blinked. "Because of the forest?" Damien slowly shook his head. "Because you are here." The words settled gently between them, carrying neither expectation nor fear. They were simply true. Emily instinctively took one cautious step closer. She noticed that the strange pressure she had felt inside the palace had completely disappeared. Instead, a comforting warmth surrounded them both, gentle enough to feel like the first sunlight after a long winter. Tiny birds that had hidden among the branches moments earlier slowly returned, landing without fear on nearby stones and low-hanging limbs. The forest no longer felt tense. It felt relieved. Behind them, the royal alchemist quietly closed his notebook with trembling hands. "The ancient records were correct," he murmured to himself. "The wolf does not answer power. It answers balance." Before anyone could speak again, a distant hunting horn echoed from somewhere beyond the trees. Then another answered from the opposite direction. Damien's peaceful expression slowly faded as he recognized the signal immediately. Search parties from the palace had entered the forest, and judging by the growing number of horns, they were no longer searching for a missing king. They were preparing to capture whatever they feared he had become. The hunting horns echoed again, closer this time, their solemn notes drifting through the towering pines until even the birds fell silent. Emily watched Damien's expression change as quiet determination replaced the fragile peace she had finally seen in his eyes. He listened for several long seconds before looking toward the distant hills beyond the stream. They are organizing a containment line, he said calmly. The captains believe they are protecting the kingdom. Emily stepped beside him. They do not know what is happening. Damien offered a faint smile that carried more sadness than comfort. No, they only know what fear tells them. The royal alchemist hurried into the clearing, carefully closing his weathered notebook beneath his arm. Your Majesty, we cannot allow the search parties to find you like this, he said. If the council believes the seal has failed completely, they will demand emergency authority over the throne. Damien nodded slowly, as though he had expected those words long before anyone spoke them aloud. Someone has wanted that authority for years. Emily looked between the two men. You think this was not simply an accident? The old scholar hesitated before answering. I believed it was an accident until I read the final pages of the records. He opened the notebook one last time, revealing a folded parchment hidden inside the back cover. Unlike the faded pages, this document appeared much newer. Its ink remained dark, and several passages had been carefully underlined. This was hidden inside the binding, he explained. Someone placed it there decades after the original text was written. Damien accepted the parchment and quietly read the first lines. His silver eyes narrowed. This is not part of the original chronicle. No, the scholar replied. It is a warning left by a former royal advisor. Emily waited as Damien continued reading. At last he lowered the parchment and spoke softly. The potion was never meant to become permanent. Each generation of advisors continued using it because they feared the prophecy. Emily frowned. What prophecy? The royal alchemist answered before Damien could. That one day an Alpha King would meet the person whose presence alone could quiet the wolf without spells, without potions, and without force. Some believed such a bond would strengthen the throne beyond challenge. Others feared it would place too much power beyond the council's control. The truth settled over the clearing like the gathering evening mist. Emily slowly looked toward the stream, where gentle ripples reflected the fading sky. Then the potion was not protecting the king, she whispered. It was delaying something. Exactly, the scholar said. Generation after generation, they treated destiny as though it were a problem to solve instead of a promise to trust. Another hunting horn sounded, much closer than before. This time, distant voices followed, calling instructions through the trees. Damien carefully folded the hidden parchment and handed it back to the old scholar. If this reaches the wrong hands, it will disappear forever. The alchemist nodded and secured it safely inside his robe. Emily turned toward Damien. What do we do now? Before he could answer, a familiar voice drifted through the forest from somewhere beyond the search line. Your Majesty, the voice called respectfully. Please come out. We only wish to escort you home. Damien remained perfectly still. That is Commander Nathan Brooks, he said quietly. One of the few people I have trusted for years. Emily noticed something Damien had already understood. The commander's words sounded respectful, but dozens of footsteps surrounded the clearing from different directions at the same time. The search parties were not simply offering an escort. They were quietly closing every path leading out of the forest. Someone had planned this far too carefully, and for the first time since the crystal vial had fallen, Emily realized the greatest danger might never have been the awakened wolf at all. Commander Nathan Brooks stepped into the clearing with slow, deliberate movements, his dark green cloak damp from the mist that had settled beneath the ancient pines. Behind him, nearly 24 royal guards remained at a respectful distance, forming a wide circle without raising a single weapon. Their expressions revealed uncertainty rather than hostility. They had sworn loyalty to their king, yet they had also obeyed the council's urgent command to surround the forest before nightfall. Nathan removed one leather glove and bowed his head. Your Majesty, the council asks that you return to the palace. They fear rumors will spread beyond the capital before sunrise. Damien studied the commander in silence. Do you believe I have become a danger? Nathan hesitated longer than Emily expected. I believe the kingdom needs its king. The answer sounded honest, yet something about the arrangement of the search party continued troubling Damien. He quietly glanced toward the surrounding trees. Every escape route had been anticipated. Every path had been covered. This had not been organized by Nathan alone. Emily noticed movement farther back among the soldiers. A tall man dressed in the deep blue robes of the royal council stood partially hidden beneath the trees, watching every word without stepping into the clearing himself. The royal alchemist quietly leaned toward Emily. "Counselor Victor Ashcombe," he whispered. "He has argued for years that the throne should answer more directly to the council." Emily remembered the hidden parchment. Suddenly, every strange event of the day seemed connected by invisible threads. Counselor Ashcombe finally stepped forward with a polished smile that never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty," he called warmly. "Everyone is relieved to see you unharmed. We have already begun preparing a stronger containment formula. By tomorrow morning, everything can return to normal." Damien's expression remained calm. "Normal?" Ashcombe nodded politely. "The potion served the kingdom well for generations." Before Damien could answer, the royal alchemist took one careful step forward. "That is not what the original records say." Every face turned toward the old scholar. He slowly removed the folded parchment from inside his robe. "The potion was never intended to become permanent. Someone changed its purpose long ago." Ashcombe's smile disappeared almost instantly. "Ancient stories are hardly reliable evidence." "Then explain why this document was hidden," the alchemist replied. "Explain why every generation was instructed to continue using a seal that delayed the prophecy instead of honoring it." A long silence settled over the clearing. Emily looked toward Damien. The silver glow within his eyes remained steady, yet peaceful. The restless energy that had frightened everyone inside the palace had almost completely faded. Nathan Brooks noticed it as well. He looked from Damien to Emily, then back again. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. The moment she arrived, everything changed. Several guards exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected to find a king struggling against an uncontrollable force. Instead, they found him calmer than he had been all day. Counselor Ashcombe stepped forward again, his composed voice now carrying quiet urgency. "This changes nothing. The kingdom cannot place its future in an untested legend and an inexperienced Omega." Emily instinctively lowered her eyes, but Damien answered before doubt could take root. "The kingdom has trusted fear for generations," he said calmly. "Today I choose trust instead." He slowly walked toward Emily until only a single step separated them. Every guard, every advisor, and every servant who had followed the search party watched without breathing. Damien gently reached for Emily's hand. The moment their hands touched, the cool evening breeze carried a faint silver shimmer through the clearing. The towering pines swayed softly, although no storm remained overhead, and the forest that had stood silent all afternoon answered with the gentle songs of returning birds. Nathan Brooks lowered his head first. One by one, the surrounding guards followed his example. None of them had been ordered to bow. They simply recognized what stood before them. For the first time in countless generations, the Alpha King's quiet strength no longer came from an ancient potion. It came from the peaceful bond that everyone had spent centuries trying to prevent. Morning sunlight poured through the palace windows as though the kingdom itself had awakened after a long and restless night. The anxious whispers that had filled every corridor the day before had softened into cautious conversations, and for the first time in years, the servants smiled without forcing themselves to do so. Emily Carter stood quietly beside one of the grand windows overlooking the royal gardens where golden leaves drifted across peaceful pathways. It all felt impossible. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had believed her future had ended with one terrible mistake. Now she found herself standing inside the royal hall as nobles, commanders, scholars, and council members gathered beneath towering silver banners waiting for the Alpha King to speak. Damien Blackwood entered without fanfare, wearing the same dark coat he had worn the previous day. Yet something about him had changed. The quiet exhaustion that had shadowed his eyes for so long had disappeared. His calm no longer looked forced. It looked natural, as though an invisible burden he had carried for years had finally been lifted. Commander Nathan Brooks stepped forward and respectfully lowered his head. One by one, the royal guards followed, then the palace servants, then the nobles themselves. Even those who had questioned the events in the forest could not deny what stood before them. Their king looked stronger without the ancient potion than he ever had while relying upon it. Damien allowed the silence to settle before speaking. "For generations," he said, his steady voice filling the hall, "our kingdom believed fear could protect us better than trust. We accepted traditions without asking why they existed. We preserved old answers while forgetting the questions they were meant to solve." Every eye remained fixed upon him. Counselor Victor Ashcombe lowered his gaze, offering no interruption. The hidden records had already been examined by the palace historians throughout the night. The truth could no longer remain buried inside forgotten books. Damien continued. Yesterday, an accident revealed something our ancestors once understood. Strength does not come from hiding who we are. It comes from accepting the people we were meant to stand beside. He turned toward Emily. She instinctively looked down, uncomfortable with so many eyes upon her. She had never dreamed of standing in the center of the royal hall. She had only wanted to do her work well. Damien smiled gently before extending his hand once again. This time, Emily accepted it without hesitation. A warm breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of pine from the ancient forest beyond the palace walls. Several white birds circled above the gardens before settling peacefully among the flowering trees. Even the oldest palace servants quietly exchanged knowing smiles. The royal alchemist stepped forward holding the weathered blue notebook. History has corrected itself, he said softly. Sometimes destiny does not arrive through perfect plans. Sometimes it arrives through a single unexpected moment that changes everything. Damien looked across the gathered crowd. Emily Carter has shown more courage through compassion than many display through power. From this day forward, she will stand at my side, not because of rank or tradition, but because together we bring balance to what was once divided. No grand celebration erupted. Instead, something far more meaningful filled the hall. Relief. Hope. The feeling that the kingdom had stepped into a future no longer controlled by fear. Emily looked toward the bright morning sky and quietly realized that the greatest mistake of her life had become the beginning of the greatest blessing she could never have imagined. And somewhere beyond the palace, hidden deep within the ancient forest, another forgotten stone pillar quietly shimmered beneath the morning sun, revealing symbols that no one had noticed before, as though an even older story had only just begun. If this journey of courage, destiny, and unexpected hope touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next adventure. Leave a like if you believe true strength is shown through kindness instead of fear. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that one small act can change an entire life. And tell us in the comments, if you had been in Emily's place, would you have followed the mysterious call into the ancient forest or stayed safely behind the palace walls?